Welcome to the Wooper Club League, Season 14, Week 7 Power Rankings, the penultimate week. We have a fall from grace up at the top, lots of confusion down in the bottom part of the playoff listing. Who will make it, who won't? We're going to find out right here. I'm your host, IllLogic, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant. As always, I'm joined by SteveChuck, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets.
Hey, everybody.
And for the final time this season, we get to go over trades and transactions, effective Week 7, or the final transactions of the season. And at the very end, last second coming in clutch here, Close Combat Club trading out that Ludicolo for Murkrow. Steve, I do like Ludicolo a lot. One of my all-time favorite mons, fake out support provides and all that, fits with the rain, but I guess he just wanted that Murkrow. I think he was eyeing that up all season.
Yeah, Murkrow's one of those mons that, was surprised it didn't get drafted. Similar to Illumise, that, mon you wouldn't really think about, but gets Prankster, gets Tailwind, and therefore has a niche. Definitely something that a couple coaches were eyeing up throughout the season as an option, and the club jumped on it. Didn't use Ludicolo so far this season, and figured they get more use out of the general uses that Murkrow brings, rather than kind of the more rain-specific, although still fake-out support, the Ludicolo brings.
Absolute shame, but we got to make some moves and transactions. You know who's been doing that? It's definitely the Cincinnati Incineroar, who'd make one final trade this season, dropping off that Tyranitar in favor of Landorus Incarnate. What an absolute beast of a mon that the Incineroar pick up to add to their already stacked lineup.
Yeah, this is a fantastic trade for the Incineroar. I know they were kind of wheeling and dealing at the trade deadline, really hoping to get a electric flying type, pleading with all of the coaches that have a Thundurus or Zapdos Kanto. Really hoping. Only able to get Landorus here from the Steamrollers. I kind of suspect that the Steamrollers, considering they're having a little bit of an off season and not as focused on the league at the moment, maybe said just okay to go with the trade. I don't know for sure. Looking at their team, I'm not 100% sure what Tyranitar does for them. They already have a rain mode with Pelipper, so adding Tyranitar, I guess it gives them a way to reset their weather if they want to do something else. But regardless, it's there now. The Cincinnati Incineroar will get much scarier with Landorus, a fantastic offensive piece that surely will help them come playoffs.
Another 4x weak to fighting dark type for the Steamrollers. We had another big transaction to go over here. It's the Wooper Boopers, who make two moves. I remember that they picked up the Venusaur last week, so two more here effective Week 7. It's the Roybombi and Lycanroc Dusk in for the Vikavolt and Hitmontop. I do like those bottom two mons quite a bit. A lot of bulk. Still keeping the sticky webs there, losing some Intimidate support, but I do kind of like the immediacy and speed that those two new options provide the Boopers.
Yeah, we had mentioned during the draft that their speed all felt very samey and clumped up, and this kind of adds some upper echelons to their speed tiers, kind of diversifying that a little bit. Maintains the option for sticky web, but does provide that, especially with the Lycanroc, that more immediate power and gives them some more options for that.
And with the Hitmontop being available, that wasn't going to last very long. At the buzzer, Route 1 Burbs coming in to pick up the Hitmontop, dropping your boy Toedscruel. What happened there?
Toedscruel was their last round pickup, I believe. Very funny to pair it with Weezing, kind of get the fast spore, ignoring Mycelium Might. But was something they just hadn't found the option to use. And as a more universally useful mon, and Hitmontop became available, they took the opportunity to grab that, something they'd have no issue bringing in the final 2 weeks and not having to force in Toedscruel and, kind of build a team around it in these final weeks.
And that's the final transaction of the season completed. So let's get into the matches here from Week 7. We get to start off with the Cincinnati Incineroar getting back on track. This one against Michael the Kanto Kinglers. Turn 1 shows he watched last week's matchup. Newly acquired Landorus does Oko Archaludon the threat, though Salamence does get up a Tailwind. Turn 2 Grimmsnarl fake out into Lando as Matt swaps in Dozo to take a dual Wing Beat. Grimmsnarl Light Screen will let it survive the Sludge Bomb. The new Walking Wake taking a yawn though. Ninetales in, Illumisa and Grimmsnarl parting shot back into Wake. Then Lando misses the double protect, so Wake's Hydro Steam will Oko it through Illumisa's Rain Dance, but Overheat does miss the Illumisa entirely. More switching. Wake misses Draco, which makes sense after last week. Salamence tanks the Liquidation. Salamence with a tech Sunny Day after Draco goes into a Protect. Ting-Lu Snarl goes off into the red card to bring Illumisa back in. Ting-Lu back in again to tank Weather Ball. Salamence reestablishes Tailwind. Yawn goes off into that Salamence. Hydro Steam into Tinglu, bring it below half, another Snarl and Yawn into Walking Wake, then Rock Slide for some Chippin' and Grimsnarl and Salamence. Salamence roosts up, but Ruination keeps it at half, and DD comes in, Dual Wing Beat does almost half to it, but Tinglu with the crit stopping Tantrum into the fresh Ninetales. That is an Oko. Charizard does have the Sun though, and with Terra Bug, that Terra Blast will finish off Tinglu, an impressive display of power. Lots more switching, but Indeedee's Follow Me helps Komodo get off the Clanger Soul with Throat Spray. Illumise comes in as Komodo protects, and it barely tanks the Dual Wing Beat. Tailwind does help it outspeed Michael and Tailwind. Clanging Scales finishes Walking Wake, brings the Tinky Salamence low even with the light screen, though Illumise does go down. Charizard finally goes down to Clanging Scales. It's just over from here. Indeedee in to stop Fake Out from Grimmsnarl, and that means Komodo can slowly claim the final 2 KOs. Matt keeping up with the top of the pack as Michael falls to the brink of elimination. Next match. This is a good one between the Terrifier Heatwave and the Newport Noctowls, but it's the Noctowls who are suddenly surging as the Heatwave drop their first match in the Wooper Club League. Right off the bat, Shiftry Fake Out into Volcanion, which lets Corviknight set up Tailwind. Toxic Spike stacks from Shiftry as Porygon 2 absorbs the Brave Bird, and Fire Blast obviously misses from Jimmy. Second layer is down as Taunt goes into Porygon, but Jimmy with the nice read, Fire Blast hits into Shiftry, and Shadow Ball doubles up into that slot to drop it after the Focus Sash. Arcanine's Rock Slide and Brave Bird team up to KO the fresh Ogerpon. Rock Slide again. Terra Poison Iron Jugulis takes much less, so Dark Pulse and Psychic bring Arcanine very low after the Citrus, but Corviknight does get Tailwind up once again. Mew skillfully dodging Rock Slide, and with Brave Bird going into the new Porygon that swapped in, Mew can finish off Arcanine with Psychic. Spectrier with a real nice Protect, but Trick Room from Mew, and it goes down to Toxic with Porygon barely hanging on. Jugulis into absorb T-Spikes. Shadow Ball absorbed by Amoonguss, but Meteor Beam Iron Jugulis. Corviknight lives on 2 and roosts up. Iron Hands in for the fainted Porygon 2. Fake Out and Air Slash team up to KO Amoonguss. Jugulis hanging on from Brave Bird. Iron Valiant Protect is great, but there's still one more turn of Trick Room with Volcanion and Spectrier both in now. Heatwave takes out Corviknight, switching in, but Spectrier does get the burn on Iron Hands. The double hex into Volcanion, and it stays above half. Bulldoze and Heavy Slam bring Valiant low. Heatwave burns Spectrier. Then the Heatwave can double into Volcanion to finish off that. But Dark Pulse Jugulis finishes off Horse, giving Jimmy 2-0 win. Well played by the Noctowls. Next match, how about yet another close one? The Waterdeep Wobbuffets on an absolute roll. This win over the Suncoming Psyducks. Turn 1, Terra Fairy for Farigiraf, Shed Tail into Sneasler, Hurricane misses the substitute, Snarl misses Farigiraf back, and Dazzling Gleam goes off, bringing Scrafty to just 3% before Citrus. Garchomp in for Farigiraf, Direclaw goes off, and immediately puts Garchomp to sleep. Tailwind from Zapdos and knockoff into Zapdos makes things more complicated for both. Cycles are in to tank the T-Bolt, but the Para, what is happening? Hurricane into Latios, who Icy Winds back. Shed Tail does go off, bringing in Manaphy for free. T-Bolt breaks the sub, but Latios KOs Zapdos back. The Trick Room from Farigiraf on the Psyducks, last turn of Tailwind, bringing in Azu for free. Rillaboom in, D-Gleam, and a crit Play Rough bring Manaphy to about half, but it gets up another Take Heart, getting Scald into Farigiraf as it nasty plots. Play Rough next turn KOs Rillaboom, Scald KOs Farigiraf in return, double Protect on Fake Out in the last turn of Trick Room, but that's Acid Armor Manaphy. Sacred Sword and Play Rough bring it to 21%. Chenpao barely surviving the double up. Terra Fairy Manaphy tanks the Sacred Sword, KOs Chenpao and lifts Play Rough on 6, and tanks E-Speed on 7 after some recovery, and Latios Heal Pulse brings it back to over half. Scald doing nice damage to Entei, and Latios goes down to Play Rough, but man, that Manaphy is a problem. Entei goes down the next turn, and it's up to you, Garchomp. Scale Shot into Sneasler for the KO as Azu hangs on from Direclaw. Scald and Garchomp burns. That's the dagger. Scrafty hangs on from Stomping Tantrum and Rough Skin after Manaphy grabs Azu. That's a 3-0 from Steve. Precarious, but calculated. Next match, how about some more chaos in the mix? It's my Buffalo Bouffalant versus the Wooper Boopers, who absolutely need to win, but I can't spare to speak about my defeat. First of the season, even if it does send the Boopers to the playoffs. So I'll let other Michael do so instead. This was the match of the week this time around. This one was absolutely tight. What did I need to do to walk away with the W? I know I already lay asleep at night wondering about my misplays from seasons past, so I know other Michael will provide excellent insight into this one for you all too. And we'll talk about the implications of this match's results in just a little bit. Next match. Speaking of other Michael, here's a nice bounce back from him. This in the form of a win over the Akron Agrons. Turn 1 Expanding Force hits Milotic hard, and Terra Fighting Superpower brings Weavile to its Sash. Knockoff bringing Deoxys low, and Direct Milotic with Dragon Tail forcing in Cress. Latios in for Weavile. Rockslide gets some chip and Cress out for Ogerpon. Weavile sacked a Hornleech, but Latios does T-Wave the pond, chilling water into it as it's healed of paralysis. Reuniclus Focus Blast brings it to just 3%. Icy Wind Latios finishes that off as Cress gets off the Trick Room, but Ursalino Blood Moon is in. Hyper Voice swept last week, but does only a third to Latios and only a quarter to Terra Water Ogerpon, who SDs up. Blood Moon goes into a Spiky Shield. Ivy Cudgel into Protect the turn after. On the last turn of Trick Room, it's another Spiky Shield, but Hyper Voice this time to at least KO the Latios. Ivy Cudgel does 2/3 to Cresselia as it gets to set up Trick Room again. Here's the critical turn for Cress. Ally switch to try and save Ursaluna, dodges Focus Blast, but Blood Moon does KO Rhenoclus from full, and Ivy Cudgel did go into the Cress slot, so that's going to OHKO the Ursaluna. How about helping Dazzling Gleam from Enamorous then? Negligible damage, especially after Milotic's Life 2, and that +2 Ivy Cudgel OHKOs Enamorous too. How about OHKOing Indeedee too? Then Cresselia the next turn. Deoxys lives after Trick Room, but certainly doesn't have the power, so Ivy Cudgel claims that one too. 5 KOs for Other Michael's Wellspring, getting at least one nice win this season. Next up is the Calgary Corviknights, who just keep racking up wins. This one against the Boulder Boulders. Turn 1 was almost crazy. Talon switch into Ninetales Alola, who eats a first impression. Eject button into Mamo to eat a T-Bolt from Sandy Shocks, but without Snow Warning on there, Raging Bolt's Weather Ball does minimal damage into the Shocks. Next turn, Ninetales sack to CC as Bruce Bonnet eats a Dragon Pulse. Duraludon in to help eat the Heat Wave. Serena eating the Spore from Bonnet. Heat Wave boosted by Helping Hand is good damage, especially with a burn onto Duraludon, though it does paralyze the Talonflame back, and Brute Bonnet with the Synthesis to keep healthy. Tailwind from Talonflame helps Serena knock off that Eviolite from Duraludon, who gets off a Snarl, and Brute Bonnet's Crunch brings Talon below half. Brute can't Synthesis again, though, thanks to Taunt Serena. Heatwave and Snarl doing chip to each side. Draco is good damage in Serena, but Zapdos Galar gets in for free on a Crunch, but that isn't the threat. It's going to be a coaching into the swapped in Mamoswine. Gyarados gets parried. Terrafire Mamo helps it survive a CC from Slitherwing and KO the Brute Bonnet. Helping Hand Ice Shard does about 2/3 to Ogerpon, but Ivy Cudgel does KO Serena, and the Flame Charge from Slitherwing into Mamo will get that KO too. Wild Charge KOs Talonflame, Terrafire Hearthflame KOs Gyarados, Raging Bolt can KO Slitherwing, but Ogerpon KOs that back with Play Rough. Sasbo out of the playoff race as Calgary suddenly surges up the standings, which unfortunately we'll be talking about sooner rather than later, as each of the final 3 matches were left uncompleted. Steamrollers forfeit to the Pikeville Pups. The Close Combat Club give the win to the Mighty Miltanks in a very important matchup, and the Clobbers Oricurios matchup has not yet been completed at the time of recording. So that's what happened in Week 7. Yes, I did end up dropping a game, and that is enough to take me out of the top spot here, at least for now. You can see a little bit of a shake-up at the top, a little bit of a shake-up at the bottom too. But actually, Steve, whenever we started talking about these, I think they kind of naturally came up in pairs. So why don't we start off with the top 2? It's you and me, it's the Wobbuffets and Bouffalant, and we actually had quite a bit of a struggle trying to figure out which one of us should be on top, but for now, I'm pretty satisfied with the Wobbuffets at 1. What separates us 2 from the pack, and why did we put you at 1 over me, at least for this week?
So yes, the biggest differential between us at the 1 and 2 spot versus the 3 and 4 Cincinnati and Calgary teams is the key wins. The Wobbuffets, of course, having wins over both the Incineroar and the Corviknights, both of their only losses, and the Bouffalant have a win over the Wobbuffets, which does kind of bring up the possibility of switching up, especially if you think, okay, Bouffalant beat Wobbuffets and the Wobbuffets beat the others. But also, that was Week 1. That was a while ago, and we don't put as much stock in that match as we do the more recent stuff. We ended up with the Wobbuffets at 1, the longest active win streak, losing the first one and then going 6-0 from there. Reasonable play, but I mean, between the two of us, things are looking close. We definitely feel that right now we're in the best position out of anyone, but a little bit of a toss-up. For now, we have to the Wobbuffets, but again, as I always say, that can certainly change week to week, even without wins or losses going opposite ways, just on how we're feeling that week.
I'm sure we'll get into that and even a little bit more in just a bit, but first we do want to round out our 6 ones. Maybe this was an even tougher toss-up for this. The Incineroar and Corviknights, I was very surprised when you told me this, Steve, but it looks like they're just about the same team as each other, which is very strange.
Yes, if you're trying to compare their schedules and to see who's had a tougher schedule, their schedules currently are a little different, and that's because they have not yet played their Week 8 match. Afterwards, they will have had the same schedule. A little bit of insight behind the currents on schedule making, an effort to try and make everyone's schedule equally balanced. Generally, the top seed and the bottom seed will play the same people, so that if you play the top seed, you're also playing the bottom seed, and on average, it should wash out. The Incineroar and Corviknights came into the season seeded 9 and 10, the middle 2 seeds, so they ended up playing. They'll have the same schedule at the end of everything. So 1 week short, they each are playing someone that the other person's played and they haven't yet, but very similar schedules. Differential very close to each other. We're given the slight edge to the Incineroar. We're feeling a little bit better about them at the moment. But as mentioned, these two are even more of a toss-up. Same schedule. They've both had the same loss to the Wobbuffets, wins to just about all the other teams. The biggest thing going for the Incineroar right now is all of their trades give them a couple of advantages going into the playoffs, where if they face rematches, they're still different matches, so they don't have to worry about just a free rematch where the opponent can try and counter team them. Additionally, that last trade to pick up Landorus for Tyranitar really does give their team a lot more power. Landorus is a very scary mon, and we feel that that might give them just enough edge to even push them up a little bit here in the power rankings.
Shout out to Landorus, put in some work probably there. Top 4 teams we do expect to finish top 4, but that is not to say that we should discount the 5 and 6. Gosh, imagine having a first round matchup against the Noctowls or the Heatwave. These are our 2 5 and 2 teams, and they did just finish off a match between themselves as well. So that seems relatively easy. How do you view the Noctowls and Heatwave moving forward to the end of the season?
Yeah, as mentioned, between the two of them, very easy, as the Noctowls just beat the Heatwave this past week. Both ending up now at 5 and 2. The Heatwave, of course, with their other loss being to the Boopers, the Noctowls to the Bouffalant. Pretty reasonable spot here at the 5 and 6, in line with their record. These are, as you mentioned, teams that certainly I don't want to play in the quarters and fear that I may have to. They're both having fantastic seasons and are really looking like scary teams come playoffs. And I'm glad to see that there aren't free matches in the quarters. That's going to be very exciting to see. I certainly am not counting these teams out. They've had some tough losses to other top teams or unavailabilities to play, but they're here now. They've definitely going to make it to playoffs, and once they're there, all it takes is a little bit of a run to win it all.
And I know that the Noctowls have it in them. I think the Heatwave do too, despite being pretty new to the league. They might be the team I'm most interested to watch in the playoffs. But maybe a couple other teams to look at down here. Look at that, it's a re-entry into the list for the Wooper Boopers after a big win over the Bouffalant. Steve, this is actually pretty consensus pick between us to put the Boopers ahead of the Agrons among the 2, 4, and 3 teams. I think more so than me letting down with play or my team building or anything. I think we were actually both very impressed with the Boopers and how they performed in what is the feature match against me, taking me down there. So actually, there may be reason to have some confidence in them moving into the playoffs.
Yeah, I've been a fan of the Boopers, and try and shout them out every chance I get. But now they're finally getting, making the playoffs here and hoping to see them do well in it. A little bit of a spoiler, I guess, for the next slide, but this does lock them into the playoff spot. And when looking at the comparison between 7 and 8, the Boopers have also had a more difficult schedule. We have been, as we're discussing it, I pull up opponent's win percentage to kind of compare. And just, for a little bit, because that's the biggest difference between equal record. The Agrons, who notably do have 16 more differential than the Boopers, their opponent's win percent is down at 27%, while the Boopers is up at 55. It's a massive difference there, and the Boopers have, faced some tougher competition and come away with just as many wins and kind of some impressive wins that have us very hopeful for them, putting them up here at the number 7. Agrons, of course, they've made it to the playoffs. They have fantastic differential for their record. And, we'll see how they do in the playoffs. They, of course, have a couple teams in the playoffs they really want to avoid. They don't usually fare well against the Wobbuffets or Bouffalant. And the other teams also, we'll see how they do. But they've made it this far, and they certainly can keep going. They may just need to try a couple new things.
And they have made a couple of moves recently, I suppose, which could potentially help them out. And it looks like they will be finishing ahead of the Boopers, assuming that they can win or the Boopers lose because of that differential, which we can take a look at right now as we take a dive into the standings. Once again, congrats to the Wooper Boopers for clinching a playoff spot, at least in the play-in game, which we'll go over in just a little bit. Potentially more interesting. Look at those top 4 teams. Yeah, they're all 6 and 1. Plus 19, plus 18, plus 18, plus 16. 3 differential points will determine who you play in the next round. Imagine all 4 of us end up winning there, the 6 and 1 teams. And it's going to be 1 or 2 differential points that could determine if you play someone scary like the Noctowls, or maybe somebody you'd be a little more comfortable with below them. And those differential points suddenly start mattering quite a bit. Big shout out to the Corviknights too. Number 1 overall right now at plus 19. Though they're down at number 4 in our power rankings, I really think that they've been very impressive for most of, if not the entire season. Steve, anything else you want to talk about the top 8 currently all locked into playoffs before we move into the final playoff odds?
You did shout out the Boopers for making it. I'll go ahead and shout the Agrons as well. We may not have think about it, but they also secured their playoff spot with their loss to the Burbs. It was actually other matches that ended up locking them in, but they also were able to secure their spot. Nothing they did this week helped, but their previous weeks and past performance giving them that 4-3 record does also lock them into that playoff spot.
And we do need to talk about the Agrons and Woopers because these are the potential gatekeepers as you talk about the teams that are still in the hunt here. The Agrons and Woopers are the teams they need to catch up to. Looks like 4 wins may be what you need to make the playoffs. But what else, Steve, do the Psyducks, Kinglers, Miltanks, and potentially even Clobberers still have to do in order to make playoffs?
Yeah, so for all of these teams to make the playoffs, they do need the Agrons or Boopers, either one of them, to lose their Week 8 game, giving them the 8th place team a 4-4 record, and opening the door for any other 4-4s to make it in. For the case of the Mighty Miltanks, actually, that's quite easy, as their Week 8 opponent is the Wooper Boopers. So a Miltanks win, it is a win and in for the Miltanks. If they win, the Boopers therefore necessarily lose. Both teams are 4-4, and they'll both make it in. The other teams, of course, all need help. The Clobbers at 2-4 need to win out with their Week 7 and 8 games, as well as get help from either the Miltanks or the Noctowls to beat the Agrons. The Psyducks and Kinglers also have a very exciting matchup this next week. They are playing each other. Winner gets the opportunity to get in with some help, again going to 4-4, while again we wait for the Agrons or Boopers to lose and open up that spot. Depending on the order these matches are played, it can become a lot more obvious or not what's going. For example, if the Agrons and Noctowls play sooner in the week, which I think they might, that kind of tells everyone, if the Agrons do lose that match, it really does open the door, and those games to get to 4-4 become a whole lot more important. So a lot to look forward to in this last week.
Speaking of, I suppose we should just go ahead and talk about that Week 8 schedule. Already brought up a couple of matches here. I think the couple that I would like to shout out, it's got to be the Boopers Miltanks, like you said, winning in for the Miltanks. We all knew we were going to be saying that at the beginning of the season, I'm sure. Also the Psyducks and Kinglers, 3-4 and 3-4. Are you kidding me? There's one loss from one of these teams that are 4-3, and they can get in 2 and a win and in. That's pretty nice too. But Steve, there are a couple other matches to look out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about the Noctowls and Agrons being important gatekeeping matches. And then a couple of the 6-1 teams going up against teams that are close. Wobbuffets against the Club, the Incineroar against the Clobbers, and the Bouffalant against the Steamrollers. All these other 6-1 teams, and what we mentioned will be a key differential race, assuming they all win, to not have to play the 5 and 6, and hopefully get the matches against the 7 and 8, who we feel will have a better chance against.
And hey, it matters for seeding in the offseason too. Finish higher in the regular season does mean quite a bit, though I think you are starting to recalibrate some things there with differential. It still very much matters for this season in standings as well. We've got 1 week left. Coming back next week, we'll show you the recap and, very excitingly, a playoff picture. Are we going to have any play-in games, or will the Agrons and Boopers gatekeep everybody else out? Last time we had that opportunity, I believe the Incineroar blew it and let in 3 teams. That was a blast. We'll see if something like that can happen again, or if they will close the door on them. You're going to have to come back next week and find out. We'll see you then.